In this video, we'll be going over a variety of checkmates, including a king and two major pieces, or a king and one major piece versus a lone king. Now let's first remember that a major piece is either a queen or a rook. The key definition for a major piece is that a major piece and a king can give checkmate to a lone king. In this case, we have one king and two queens versus black's lone king. Here, we can use the two queens themselves to give checkmate without involving our own king. Let's begin. In this position, the best move for white is to play the move queen to g2. The reason for this move is that the queen now blocks off the second rank. Black's king can never go past this line here, and he'll be forced to go towards the 8th rank, which is where he'll eventually be checkmated. So after queen to g2, black has a lot of options, but let's just say, for example, he plays king to c3. Now after king to c3, we can play the move queen to h3 check. Now why do we do this? Like I said before, our intention is to push the king back to the 8th rank. We notice that the king cannot go to any of these squares because this queen is controlling the 2nd rank. Because of this, the king needs to move to the 4th rank, for example, king to c4. Now once again, we can continue to push the king towards the 8th rank. This time, our queen on h3 is controlling all of the 3rd rank. After a queen controls all the 3rd rank, this means that the king is once again confined to everything 4th rank and up. Because of this, we can now play the move queen to g4 check, forcing black's king towards the 8th rank even more. Black's king is forced to go back to the 5th rank, and now white's queen on g4 is controlling all the squares on the 4th rank as well. So after queen to h5 check, we keep doing this process, and the king is forced to go on the 6th rank. So once again, the king cannot go on the 4th rank because the queen is controlling it. We continue this process by playing the move queen to g6 check. Now after queen to g6 check, I don't need to mention it, but the king once again cannot go onto the 5th rank because this queen now controls all of the 5th rank. The king is forced to go back to e7, or d7, or c7. It doesn't really matter. And now we need to play the move queen to h7. Just one little caution here before I go on. In this position, a lot of beginners might get confused about which queen to move. Would it be this queen to give check here, or would it be this queen to give check here? Well, both seem to make a lot of sense because you're giving check on the 7th rank. However, we notice that there's a key difference here. If we give check with the queen on the h file, then the queen on the g file is still controlling the 6th rank. This means that the king cannot go on the 6th rank, and he must retreat back to the 8th rank. On the other hand, if we give check using this queen here, this queen is no longer on g6, so the 6th rank is no longer controlled. Now if the king moves back to d8, then we have the same kind of result. However, here, black has the option of moving his king up to the e6 square. Here we either have to repeat moves, or if we play another check with this queen, we lose all the progress, and now we're actually chasing the king towards the 1st rank. Therefore, we need to make sure that this queen stays in place to keep control of the 6th rank, and we need to use the other queen to give check. So after queen to h7 check, black is forced to move to the 8th rank, so let's say king f8. Now, a key trait about these two queens here is that they protect each other. At all points, no matter where these two queens are, these queens have been protecting each other. So we don't need to worry about the king capturing one of the queens. For this reason, we can play the move queen to g8 right now. That's checkmate. You might also know that from this diagram here, you can see that the zigzag pattern here. The name given to this checkmate is called the staircase mate. Not the zigzag mate, but the staircase mate. I guess somehow this looks like a staircase if you tilt your head enough. But anyway, this is the easiest way to checkmate the opponent when you have two major pieces versus his lone king. A variation of the two queen checkmate occurs when we have a queen and a rook instead of a queen and two queens. In this situation, our strategy is the same, but there's a little bit of a twist at the end. In this position, we already noticed that the queen is controlling the 2nd rank. This means that the king cannot go across this line, and if it has a check, then we must force the king to go this way. So in this position, we need to play the move rook to h3 check. After checking the king, we control all the squares on the 3rd rank, and all the squares on the 2nd rank. This leaves the king only the options on the 4th rank, for example, king to c4. After black plays king to c4, the rook controls all the 3rd rank, so we should check on the 4th rank. This time, since the rook controls the third rank, we need to check with the queen on the fourth rank. We do this by playing the move queen to g4. After queen to g4, black plays the move king to d5. Right? Black has no options on the third rank. He can't stay on the fourth rank. All these squares are covered. That means he must go to the fifth rank. So he plays the move king to d5. After king to d5, it's white's turn again. This time, which piece should white move? Should white move the queen or should white move the rook? If you want some time, you can pause the video and think about it. However, in this position, we should move the rook. Check. The problem with moving the queen once again is that the queen, after the queen moves, is no longer guarding the fourth rank. This gives black the option to move his king into the fourth rank, which is not with our idea of getting the king to the eighth rank. Since we want to get the king to the eighth rank, the goal is to push the king that way, up, instead of down. Therefore, we should play the move rook to h5. Since the queen controls the fourth rank, black is forced to move his king onto the sixth rank. For example, king to d6. Now here, we need to play the move queen to g6 check, because the rook controls the fifth rank, and we need to use our queen to force the king to move, yet again, onto the seventh rank. Now, one more time, we need to move our rook, check, to force his king onto the eighth rank, like this. And now, we're ready to checkmate. Queen to g8, right? Well, it turns out it's not so simple. After queen to g8, the rook here is not a queen, so unfortunately the rook is not protecting the queen right now. Therefore, black can actually capture the queen, and now even though white's still winning, this position has become much more complicated than it needs to be. Instead, the best idea is to use the other side of the board. If we can't checkmate on g8, then why don't we checkmate on a6? Now I know that we can play queen to f7 checkmate immediately. However, I'm just demonstrating this so that if you want to know how to checkmate when, or how to continue checking when we have a problem like this, where we cannot play our queen immediately next to the king, we can play the move queen a6, moving our pieces to the other side of the board. Now if you place king to e8, obviously we can checkmate on a8. And if you place king to g8, we can bring our rook over, and after king to f8, we can play our move queen a8 anyway. Another example of this I can show is here, when we have the queen and the rook already here and his king is on f4. Here, queen f3 is not checkmate. White can also not play the move queen to g4. Therefore, the correct move for white is to play the move queen to a2. The idea here is to move our queen onto this side of the board so that our queen can now give check with our rook on this side of the board, on the queen side. Now if he chases our rook again with king to g4, we can move our rook onto this side. And now we're immune from his king. So if he plays king f5, we just use our typical staircase method, right? We play queen here, bring our rook here, bring our queen there, bring our rook there, bring our queen there. It will be checkmate no matter what he does. So for example, king to e5, we check. If king to d6, we play queen to a6 check. And now if king to c7, this time we actually don't need to move our rook onto the h5, because after rook to b7, the king can't capture a rook because our queen is protecting our rook. So black's king can only capture a queen because the rook cannot capture the queen. However, black's king cannot capture the rook because the queen is protecting the rook. So once again, black's king cannot capture the rook because we have our queen is protecting the rook. However, if the queen and the rook were to switch spots, the rook would not be protecting the queen because the rook cannot move diagonally. Therefore, white cannot have his queen in front. So after rook to b7 check, black has to play king to c8 or somewhere else on the 8th rank, and queen to a8 is checkmate. We have one final variation here on the two major piece checkmate. Here we have two rooks, and the difference is that the two rooks here cannot protect each other because they cannot move diagonally. However, against the lone king, we don't need to use our own king to give checkmate. The two rooks are sufficient. Let's see how this would work. We first played the move rook to h3 check. Now the rook here on g2 is controlling all the second rank, so after rook to h3 check, the king is forced to move onto the 4th rank. Let's say he plays king to f4. After king to f4, we already have our first complication. The rook on g2 can't move to g4 because after rook to g4 check, the rooks aren't protecting each other, so black's king can simply snap our rook off. For that reason, we need to move our rook onto the a file after the rook a2. After rook a2, we're planning to play rook to a4 check, and that will be out of the reach of black's king. Now black's king can come over to king g4 and harass our rook on h3, but our solution is simple. We move our rook onto the b file so that the other rook is also away from black's king. Now black can continue to try to play his king back towards the queen side to harass white's rooks again. But meanwhile, we can still give checks. Now this rook controls all the third rank, so we can move rook to a4, check, and after king to e5, we can continue with our process we had before by playing rook to b5, check. Once again, the rook on a4 controls the entirety of the fourth rank, and after rook to b5 check, the king is forced to go onto the sixth rank. Now after, for example, king to d6, if black tries to continue moving his king towards the queen side to harass white's rooks, we can play the move rook to a6 check, continuing our strategy of our staircase mate. After king to c7, this time we cannot play rook to b7 check because the king can take it. Here then we need to move our rook onto h5, getting our rook away from black's king. Our threat now is to play rook to h7 check. So black has one last resort. He can play the move king to b7, trying to attack our rook on a6, but no worries, we can move our rook onto the other side of the board again. Here, black has nothing left to do, and he can just play king to c7 again. But after king to c7 again, we can play rook to h7 check, and after rook to h7 check, this rook controls all of the sixth rank, and after king to d8, we can give checkmate on g8 check. Checkmate. It's important to notice here that we did not move a rook behind or something like that because it doesn't make any sense. Remember that our goal is to move his king onto this 8th rank. We corner his king onto the edge of the board, and afterwards we can give him checkmate there. Therefore, it only makes sense to keep control of the ranks we already have. We already have these two ranks, which block the king from moving towards our side of the board. Therefore, we should keep these ranks and make sure we move horizontally, not vertically. So for 2 rooks, 2 queens, and rook and queen, we checkmate by using the staircase method, where we build upon each other, and we eventually push the king towards the other side of the board, where we get checkmate.